The distant hum of the starship's engines was the only sound that filled the darkened room. Lieutenant Lucas Reeves sat in the cockpit, his hands gripping the controls as the ship cut through the vast expanse of space. His mission was simple enough: survey an uncharted sector and gather intel for the Galactic Council. Nothing too complicated, but something about this part of the galaxy felt off. The energy signatures he had picked up earlier had been unusual. Almost like they were waiting for him. He rubbed his eyes, the exhaustion creeping in after days of isolation. His ship, the Wanderer, had been his only companion on this journey, and he had learned to trust its systems. But as the ship moved deeper into the unknown, something else called to him, something that felt like it wasn't supposed to be there. "Commander, I've found something," Lucas muttered to himself, his voice breaking the silence. The comm system crackled, but he didn't expect a response. His crew was back home on Earth, awaiting his return. He was alone, just the way he preferred it. He stared at the screen in front of him, tracking the faint energy signals. They weren't from any known species, not even from the highly advanced civilizations he had encountered during his travels. These were different. Not quite organic, not quite mechanical. And yet, they seemed to pulse with life, calling to him from across the stars. Suddenly, a jolt rocked the ship, sending Lucas tumbling forward into the control panel. Alarms blared as the lights flickered violently. The ship was descending too fast, and no matter how much Lucas tried to steady the controls, the descent only accelerated. His heart raced as the ship spiraled toward an uncharted planet, its surface glowing ominously beneath him. "Systems failure, impact imminent," the computer warned in a robotic monotone. Lucas gritted his teeth and slammed his fist on the control panel, but there was no use. The Wanderer was going down. The crash was violent. A sudden flash of white, followed by total darkness. Lucas's head hit the seat, and everything went black. When he awoke, it was to the sharp scent of burnt metal and something floral. It was a smell that didn't belong on any spaceship he'd ever encountered. His body ached, and his hands instinctively moved to check the wounds that he expected to find, but there were none. No broken bones. No gashes. He couldn't have survived this crash, could he? With a groan, he forced his eyes open. The world around him was blurry, but he could make out the faint glow of strange symbols on the walls. His hands shot out to grab the edges of the seat, but instead of the cold steel of his ship, they met soft, smooth material. The room he was in was unlike anything he had seen before. The walls shimmered with an iridescent glow, and strange, ethereal plants hung from the ceiling. It was a mix of alien technology and nature, entwined in ways that didn't seem possible. The floor was covered in soft, silken cushions, and in the corner of the room, he spotted what looked like a bed, draped with intricate fabrics that resembled the stars themselves. But it was the figure standing in front of him that caught his attention. A woman. She was tall, with long silver hair that flowed down her back like liquid mercury. Her skin shimmered in the light, a deep shade of green that almost seemed to glow. Her eyes were a piercing shade of amber, unlike anything Lucas had ever seen before. There was something unsettlingly beautiful about her, yet she seemed to radiate power and danger. She stood perfectly still, watching him with a calm intensity. "You're awake," she said, her voice soft but commanding. Lucas blinked, still trying to comprehend his surroundings. Where am I?" "You're on my ship," she replied, her expression unreadable. "The Heiress. I found you after your crash. It's a miracle you survived." Lucas's mind raced as he looked around, trying to make sense of everything. "I don't understand. How did you?" "I'm Niara," she interrupted, her eyes narrowing as if she were analyzing him. "Chief of Security for the Heiress. And you, human, you found yourself in a very unusual position." A strange chill ran down Lucas's spine. He had heard stories of alien species before, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. An alien, one so unlike anything he had encountered, was standing in front of him. And she seemed too curious about him. Too interested. "I don't know how I ended up here," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "My ship. It crashed." "I know," Niara interrupted again, her amber eyes glowing faintly. She took a step closer, her movements fluid and almost hypnotic. "But there's more to you than meets the eye, human. You're not just any explorer. You're the one we've been waiting for." Lucas frowned, his confusion deepening. "What do you mean?" Niara stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "You'll find out soon enough." But first, she reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against his chest. "You need to rest." Lucas stiffened, unsure of her intentions. There was an undeniable pull in the air, something magnetic between them. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice low but firm. Niara's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a comforting one. "Then you'll understand why you must stay here. For your own good." The silence in the room thickened as Niara's presence seemed to fill every corner. The only sound was the gentle hum of the Eris's engines. Something inside Lucas told him that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed about himself, about humanity, and about love. He wasn't sure what to expect next, but as he stared into Niara's glowing eyes, he had a feeling his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The silence in the room stretched on as Lucas tried to make sense of the strange alien woman standing before him. His mind raced, but his body still felt the effects of the crash, the exhaustion taking its toll. Despite his body's urge to collapse, something inside him kept him sitting upright, his gaze locked with Niara's amber eyes. She hadn't moved. Her posture remained poised, commanding, as though she didn't have a care in the world. The air felt thick with something Lucas couldn't name. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of the situation or the powerful, almost magnetic energy emanating from her, but whatever it was, it made him feel vulnerable in a way he never had before. Niara took a step back, the silken material of her clothing shimmering in the soft, otherworldly light of the room. "You should rest," she repeated, her voice low and soothing, yet carrying an undertone of authority. "I'm fine," Lucas replied, though the words felt hollow as the room spun slightly around him. His body wasn't fine. He was tired, his limbs sore from the crash, and his head was pounding. But there was something else, a deeper unease gnawing at him. He needed answers, and he wasn't about to let his guard down just yet, not with this alien woman who seemed to know more about him than he did. Niara smiled, and for the first time, Lucas caught a glimpse of warmth in her expression, though it was quickly replaced by something else, something unreadable. "You're far from fine, human," she said, her eyes softening as she stepped closer again. "You may not be injured, but the crash has taken a toll on you. You don't have the luxury of time to recover on your own." Lucas wasn't used to being treated like this. He was a trained explorer, accustomed to rough situations, but this felt different. This wasn't just an alien encounter, it was personal. And that was what unsettled him the most. He opened his mouth to argue, but she raised a hand, silencing him. "Listen to me, Lucas Reeves," she said, her voice steady but firm. "This ship is not like anything you've encountered before. The Eris is not just a vessel, it's a place of great importance. And you," she paused, her eyes locking with his, "are the key." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "The key?" Lucas repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He had no idea what she meant, but the way she said it sent a chill through him. "What are you talking about?" Niara's expression softened, but there was a guarded look in her eyes now, like she was deciding whether to trust him with something far bigger than himself. "The Eris has been drifting in this sector for a reason. It's not here by accident. And neither are you." She walked over to a nearby console, her graceful movements nearly hypnotic, as she began typing in commands. The holographic display flared to life, casting an ethereal glow on her face. I know about your species, Lucas. The stories of human ingenuity, your ability to adapt and survive against overwhelming odds, they have spread far and wide across the stars. I'm just a regular guy, Lucas muttered, still trying to understand where this conversation was headed. I'm not anything special. Niara turned, her glowing amber eyes piercing his as if she could see straight through him. You are. To us, humans are unique. Your species has something that others don't, something that we've lost. Lucas furrowed his brow. What's that supposed to mean? Niara's gaze softened as she moved closer once again, but this time, there was something in her eyes that sent a spark of understanding through him. You're driven by something that's hard to define. Passion. Emotion. A fire within you that burns brighter than any star in the galaxy. It's what makes humans special. A wave of disbelief washed over Lucas. You're saying I'm some sort of special project? A curiosity to study? She shook her head, the corners of her lips curving into a smile that was both comforting and unsettling. No. I'm saying that you, Lucas Reeves, are a rare anomaly. And I believe you're the only one who can help us. Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but his words caught in his throat. Before he could respond, the walls of the room seemed to hum with energy, and the air grew colder. Niara's expression shifted from calm to urgent in an instant. Something's wrong, she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing. We're not alone. The hairs on the back of Lucas's neck stood up as the room's atmosphere shifted once more. The calmness he had felt moments before was replaced by an undeniable tension, and he could see the flicker of concern in Niara's eyes as she glanced around, her body tensing with alertness. What's going on? Lucas asked, his voice tight. Who else is here? Niara didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved quickly to the doorway and placed her hand on the strange symbols etched into the wall. The symbols glowed briefly before the door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a corridor beyond. There's a presence on this ship, she said, her voice cold and calculated now, no longer the calming tone it had been earlier. A presence I don't want you to face alone. Lucas stood up, still feeling weak from the crash, but the adrenaline of the moment had already started to surge through him. What kind of presence? Niara looked back at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and something else, something Lucas couldn't quite place. It's something I've been trying to contain. A force more powerful than you can imagine. Before he could ask any more questions, Niara turned, her tentacle-like appendages flickering from beneath the fabric of her clothes, and beckoned him forward. Come with me. The Eris isn't just a ship. It's a prison. A prison? Lucas's mind spun as he followed her down the corridor. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into. But he knew one thing for sure, whatever was lurking in the shadows of this alien ship, he was about to be a part of it. The corridor stretched before Lucas like an endless passageway of dark steel and flickering lights. The air was thick with the scent of alien machinery and something ancient, like the ship itself had been abandoned for centuries, yet still pulsed with life. He followed Niara closely, every step echoing in the narrow passage as her glowing eyes guided the way. The silence around them was oppressive, almost suffocating. What's this prison you're talking about? Lucas asked, his voice breaking the eerie stillness. What's really on this ship? Niara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she paused in front of a large door, her hand brushing against a panel on the wall. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. Inside, there was a large, transparent container at the center of the room, filled with a swirling, dark energy. Lucas stepped inside, his eyes locked on the container. There was something wrong about it. The energy inside wasn't just dark, it was alive, pulsating with a sinister rhythm that seemed to match the beat of his own heart. Niara's voice was low and serious as she spoke, this is where it all began. The Eris wasn't always a prison ship. It was designed to transport valuable cargo, but that cargo turned out to be something much more dangerous. Lucas squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. That thing in there, is what you're trying to contain? Yes, Niara replied. That is the Void Walker. The name sent a chill down Lucas's spine. What is it? Some kind of alien monster. Niara's eyes flashed, her expression shifting with a mix of anger and fear. It's no monster. It's something far worse. The Void Walker is an ancient entity, an energy being that can take over other life forms. It feeds on emotions, on fear, anger, and despair. The more it consumes, the stronger it becomes. And once it's had enough, it can escape. Lucas stared at the swirling energy inside the container. How did you manage to trap it? Niara's gaze softened for a brief moment. It wasn't easy. The Ares was designed to withstand its power, but it wasn't until we made the decision to transport the Void Walker that we realized just how dangerous it truly was. When we were ambushed by another species, we tried to contain the entity using the ship's systems, but it breached containment during the attack. We barely managed to stop it, but we had to lock down the ship to prevent it from escaping. The only thing that kept it from getting out was the emergency protocols designed to only recognize the Sylvani biosignatures, my people. That's why you needed me? Lucas asked, his mind spinning. Because I'm human, and my biosignature is different? Niara nodded, her amber eyes never leaving his. Exactly. You're our only chance to override the lockdown. The Void Walker is still on board, and as long as it remains in this state, it will continue to grow in power. We can't keep it contained forever. We need someone like you, to help us. A surge of adrenaline hit Lucas. He wasn't sure if it was fear or excitement, but he felt a strange responsibility weighing on him. Here he was, just a simple explorer, caught up in something far bigger than himself. Something dangerous. Something that could destroy everything. You're asking me to free it? He asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. To risk everything? Niara's eyes softened again, but there was no hesitation in her words. I'm not asking you to free it. I'm asking you to help us contain it for good. We've tried everything. But the Void Walker's presence here is growing, and the only way to stop it is to use a biosignature that it doesn't recognize, something new, something human. Lucas's mind raced as he processed her words. It sounded insane. But something in his gut told him she wasn't lying. There was something about her, a strength, a depth of emotion that drew him in, made him want to believe in what she was saying. She had risked everything to keep the Void Walker locked away, and now, she was asking for his help. How do we do it? He asked, steeling himself for the unknown. We'll need to access the ship's core systems. The central control room, Niara replied. Once we override the lockdown, the Void Walker will be locked in place, and we can deal with it once and for all. Before Lucas could respond, the ship suddenly lurched again, as if the very walls were groaning in protest. A loud, high-pitched noise echoed through the chamber. Niara's eyes widened in alarm. It's awake, she whispered, her voice filled with urgency. It knows you're here. The humming noise grew louder, and Lucas felt his pulse quicken. The air around them began to feel heavier, thicker. He could almost feel the presence of something malevolent watching him, pressing in on him from all sides. We don't have much time, Niara said, grabbing Lucas's arm. We need to move now. Without another word, she pulled him out of the chamber, the door hissing closed behind them. The corridor felt colder now, and the low growl of the ship's engines was drowned out by the growing intensity of the noise reverberating through the walls. The Void Walker was awake, and it was hungry. Where are we going? Lucas asked, his voice urgent. To the control room. I'm going to need you to trust me, Lucas, Niara said, glancing back at him with a look that was equal parts desperation and determination. This is it. This is what I've been preparing for. As they ran through the corridors, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was alive, almost sentient, and it didn't want them there. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy all their own, and the temperature dropped even further as they neared the control room. "Stay close," Niara commanded, and Lucas did. They had no idea what they were up against, but he knew one thing. He wasn't about to let her face it alone. As they reached the door to the control room, it slid open automatically, and a wave of cold air washed over them. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with complex control panels that hummed with power. But it wasn't the systems that grabbed Lucas's attention, it was the presence of the Void Walker, its energy swirling outside the containment chamber, pushing against the walls as if it were testing its limits. Niara took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing." Lucas followed her lead, standing by her side as she approached the central console, her fingers flying over the controls. The Void Walker's presence was growing stronger by the second, but so was their resolve. If they didn't succeed, everything, every life, was at risk. And Lucas was determined to be the one to stop it. The control room was eerily quiet now. The constant hum of the ship's systems filled the air, but the overwhelming sense of danger that had pressed in on them just moments before was gone. The Void Walker was contained, its dark presence locked away. But Lucas could still feel the residual weight of its power, like a shadow clinging to the edges of his mind. He glanced at Niara, who was still standing beside him. Her silver-green skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and her amber eyes held a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something unspoken. Despite the immense pressure she had been under, she looked relieved, her posture finally relaxing. "You did it," Niara whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved us all." Lucas, still trying to catch his breath, nodded but said nothing. He was exhausted, his body aching from the emotional and physical toll the confrontation had taken. But there was a sense of peace settling in his chest. They had done it. They had contained the Void Walker, and in doing so, had prevented something catastrophic from happening. But as Niara's hand gently rested on his shoulder, Lucas realized that the fight wasn't over. Not really. The Void Walker may have been contained, but there was still much to be done. The Ares was in disrepair, its systems damaged by years of neglect and the recent attack. And more than that, there was still the question of what would happen next. Would the Ares survive? And more importantly, what did this strange connection with Niara mean? "Niara," Lucas said, his voice hoarse from the effort. "What happens now?" Her eyes flickered with a mix of uncertainty and resolve. "Now, we rebuild." "But I don't think that's the end of our story, Lucas." He raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Niara hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering away from his. But then, with a deep breath, she turned back to him, her expression soft but serious. "You've done more than just help us contain the Void Walker. You've proven something to me, something I didn't expect. You're not just a human, Lucas. You're a force of nature." Lucas chuckled lightly, though the weight of her words lingered in the air. "I'm just a guy who got lucky. You're the one who kept everything together." "No," she said firmly, her amber eyes locking with his. "You brought something to the table that no one else could. The power of your emotions, your drive, your heart, it's something I've never seen before. It's something that makes you special. And it's what kept us alive." The words hit Lucas like a wave, crashing over him. He hadn't realized it before, but something about their bond, something deeper than just survival, had been growing ever since they met. Their connection wasn't just about defeating the Void Walker. It was about understanding each other, about bridging the gap between their species, their worlds. "You make it sound like I'm more than just a guy with a weird job," Lucas said, his voice a little teasing, but his smile was genuine. He wasn't sure how to process everything that had happened, but he knew one thing, he felt different. Stronger. More connected to the universe and to Niara than he ever thought possible. Niara stepped closer, her hand reaching out to gently touch his cheek. "Maybe you are," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "Maybe you're the key to something much bigger than we realize." For a moment, they just stood there, the world around them fading away. The hum of the Eris was a constant background noise, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered in that moment except for the shared connection between them. Lucas could feel the weight of their shared experience, the fear, the danger, and the triumph. But more than that, he could feel something that ran deeper than any physical bond. It was something intangible, something powerful. And it was love. Real, undeniable, and deep. Niara's eyes glowed softly, her amber gaze never leaving his. "I never thought this would happen. I never thought that a human would be the one to save us. But I'm glad you did." Lucas took a deep breath, still feeling the effects of their battle, but now, more than ever, he felt alive. "You didn't expect me to be the hero?" She smiled, a playful gleam in her eyes. "Not exactly. But now I can't imagine anyone else in your place." Lucas grinned, reaching out to gently take her hand in his. "Well, if it helps, I can't imagine being anywhere else. Not now, not with you." The room seemed to grow warmer, as if their shared words had released a wave of energy between them. Niara didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her breath cool against his skin. "Then we have much more to do, Lucas. Much more." The sound of the ship's systems shifting filled the silence, but Lucas didn't care. In that moment, the universe felt like it had slowed down just for them. The chaos was over. The battle had been won. And whatever came next, whether it was rebuilding the Eris or facing new dangers, he knew one thing for sure, he would face it with her by his side. Together, they were unstoppable. As Niara leaned in closer, their lips finally met in a kiss that sealed their bond, a kiss filled with promise, with hope, and with the understanding that, no matter what, they were stronger together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since he had crash-landed on this alien ship, Lucas felt ready for whatever it held.